second to go for the win. He got it. The Cougars win it. Number one remains number one. Cougars reset. Jackson again finds it. And the Houston Cougars go from the first floor out to the Sweet 16.
Stick it in your pipe and smoke it, baby.
Yes! Welcome to the Scott Holm Podcast. Back to you on a Tuesday night, and I feel like I've almost been, exaggerating the meatiness of some previous episodes. Don't get me wrong, we've had plenty of Houston Cougar stuff to talk about because we have basketball season plenty to talk about. We're not fully hitting the panic button on the men's season after a tough loss on the road. TCU will dive into everything there. We've got two new sports to talk about the future season, to look ahead to Cougar spring and late winter sports to come, which is always fun here. Some football off-season talk, because as a Texas-based institution, the University of Houston is truly in a spot where football season never ends, other than like maybe 4 weeks in July. I've already talked too much, Dustin, considering I have as many notes as we've had all season. I don't know if this is the most notes I've had in doing a show, but it's a good heaping amount. It's about 11 pages when it's all said and done. So I'll pass it off to you, my friend. How are you doing, bud?
I'm doing well. I'm glad to have managed to avoid the worst of the weather the last couple days. Hope everyone listening, whether you're in Houston or anywhere else, is staying safe out there, with the weather being what it is right now. Staying off those freeways, staying off those overpasses, and staying safe, and hopefully being able to stay home and stay warm with whether with your loved ones or whatever the case may be. So happy to be at home and relatively warm, and have made it through the last couple of days. But yeah, it's I'm happy to live in Houston because I can deal with basically any level of heat, and it's just like whatever. But man, when it gets down to like well below freezing, I'm like, no, I want no part of that. I don't want to go out in the world. I don't want to do anything. So yeah, just ready for this little cold snap to be over for sure.
You know how I think the young people say built for this? As somebody who has spent your adult life in Southern California and Houston mostly, with all respect to you, my friend, you are not built for cold weather. Neither am I, really.
Even coming from Iowa stock, I am not built for this cold weather.
Yeah. My dad, who's from very north of the Mason-Dixon line, has told me repeatedly that there's a shelf life for tolerating the cold, even if you grew up somewhere like that. Bobby, I know how your last few days in your work trip has gone. You, like me, have experienced the pleasure of having the domicile you're staying at, whether it's temporary or permanent, flooded with water. Never fun. How you holding up, friend?
Hey man, I am chilling out in a completely different hotel in a completely different city. My hotel flooded in Tulsa, which that city is just absolutely cursed for me. I think I have one positive memory while being in that city, and that was sticking it in your pipe and smoke it. Other than that,
2010 NCAA or 2010 Conference USA tournament.
Yeah, okay, two. Fair point. I forgot about that one. There's two.
I'm the one that wasn't there. Sorry.
There's two. You got two out of it, out of the 8 times I've been in this in that godforsaken city. And it's even the other year that we won there, when 2011 when we won in Tulsa, that's a negative memory for me, because I remember yelling at their fans, "Have fun at your bowl game in Dallas," because I was 100% certain that we were going to go to the Sugar Bowl, and then we played in Dallas for our bowl game. So yeah, even that's a bad memory for me. So Tulsa is cursed to me. If I can do anything in my power to never go back, I'm going to certainly try. But now I'm in Oklahoma City, freezing my you-know-what off. When I got to Tulsa in Oklahoma City, the temperature was in the single digits. Hard pass on doing that ever again. So many layers. Everyone's like, oh, I have coworkers that live in the north and Minnesota and stuff, and they're like, I love the cold. You can just add more layers. You can't take layers off. And I'm like, I look like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man right now, and I'm still freezing. You can keep adding layers to me. I'm going to be miserable. Okay, I'm going to be miserable. So yeah, cold, way out on it. But yeah, trying to relax a little bit.
Right, we like that spirit there, and yeah, I think all of us as people who are from or have lived a significant amount of time in Texas, not built for the cold, cannot layer for that shit. With all honesty, really got to mention at the top here, our usual housekeeping, patreon.com/SH podcast for as little as 16 cents a day. You can support what we do here as a weekly independent Houston Cougar sports podcast, get access to premium content, but I think above all else, just support the weekly work we do, which is, in addition to all three of our full-time jobs, we do this labor of love here at Talkin' Houston Cougars. Of course, support our network partners, the 1012 Network at TN12 Network, wherever you social media. And I got some important stuff to talk about tonight, guys. You know what I'm going to talk about here. The new Cougar Hoops collection from our good friends at Charlie Hustle. An absolutely fantastic release. I think the three of us all took it on faith that when Charlie Hustle made it clear to us in the last few weeks that, hey, we've got a new Cougar collection coming, I think we were all, not to speak for you guys, reasonably confident that was going to be good designs, but they absolutely knocked it out of the park. CharlieHustle.com. A really great original collection to build upon, but great Cougar shirts, hoodies, a long sleeve in there, aplenty. I am wearing tonight, little assist to Bobby, peek behind the curtain. I am wearing the cartoon Cougar dunking a basketball. Really, really fantastic. You get the YouTube listeners got to see about 1.5 seconds of that great design. Go to charliehustle.com. Use our promo code SHP15, SHP15. That's going to save you 15% off any order you do from our good friends in Kansas City, Charlie Hustle. Not the sum total of ultimately what they're going to do in terms of great Cougar wearables, incredibly comfortable, great designs, but I think a nice addendum to us already. Just a fantastic collection. So Charlie Hustle, charliehustle.com. Go there. Look really good for this closing stretch of the Big 12 season with you wearing some good Charlie Hustle Cougar gear. So, all right, guys. If I had to use one word to describe the TCU game on Saturday, Cougar men's basketball's second loss in a row in Big 12 play, I would use this word: frustrating. Not frustrating in the sense that I'm panicking about this season or that I think something is fundamentally broken with this team. This team has flaws, but literally every team in Division I has some degree of flaw with their team. And if anyone in your life is saying that there's something fundamentally broken with Cougar men's basketball, you have my permission on behalf of the entire Scott Nolan podcast to permanently cut that person out of your life. Clean break, no goodbyes. But I mean, in all seriousness, I think what makes it so frustrating, guys, isn't that we're talking about two games where it was just like, wow, this team really isn't ready to compete on the road in the Big 12. They competed in both these losses. Both these losses were games that were very, very much in doubt until the very closing stages, if not the buzzer of the game. And yet we are talking about a team that's 1-2 in Big 12 play. We knew it'd be difficult. I don't think any of this is a surprise to us, but that still did make, I think, Saturday's 1-point loss to the TCU Horned Frogs still very frustrating because you could see how close this was to us, I think, talking about this most recent game in an entirely different tone.
Yeah, I think it's frustrating. Frustrating was, even as you were doing your build up to the one word, I was like, frustrating. Frustrating is my word. I'm not surprised that it was yours too. And it just, yeah, it was frustrating. You know, Cougs in the first half leading by double digits, and you think, okay, hey, maybe we're going to actually have, you know, one of those just kind of hold the team at arm's length kind of games. But getting Jamal Shed that second foul early on in the first half was key because, you know, I think if Jamal Shed is playing the entire first half, I think there's a good chance Houston goes into halftime with something looking like a double-digit lead. But it just kind of felt inevitable that TCU was going to claw back into this one with the Cougs having to play. I think it was like 13 straight minutes to close out the first half without Jamal Shed. Really, one of the few times in the 9-10 years now that we've had Kelvin Sampson as head coach where I go, yeah, I don't know about the decision he's making right now. Just because, I think as a point guard, you can trust your point guard maybe more than other positions to not get that second foul. And just the fact that, when Jamal came back in the second half, he had some stretches where he looked amazing, would make like 3 or 4 plays in a row, and you go, holy cow. And then he would just, have a couple of plays that just don't look like him.
He looks cold. Yeah.
Yeah. And you look if he was a little cold, a little rusty from having that lengthy stretch out in the first half. And I don't know. I think that's one looking back where maybe Kelvin Sampson is going to say, you know what? I normally don't play anyone in the first half once they pick up their second foul. I probably needed to see if I could get 3, 4, 5 more minutes out of Jamal in that first half to kind of keep things going. But even without that, TCU led for much of the second half, especially early on, led by as many as 7. With the Cougs rallied, led for most of the final 5 minutes. Houston did. When a Jamal Shed 3 put Houston up 4 with 90 seconds to go, I have to admit, I was kind of like, we're going to pull it out. We got it. We're going to pull this one out. It was ugly, but we're going to pull this one out. But TCU's Trevian Tennyson hit yet another 3. Seemed like he hit every 3 he took in that game. Hit another 3 right away, pulled it right back down to 1 point. The ensuing possession, Juwan Roberts finally goes to the free throw line for the first time all game after miraculously not being fouled in his first 18 field goal attempts. Finally goes to the free throw line, misses the front end of a 1-and-1. TCU's Emmanuel Miller drives, makes a nice kind of contested layup with 6 seconds to go to give TCU the 1-point lead. And instead of calling a timeout, another decision I think Kelvin Sampson already publicly kind of said was probably a mistake on his part. Houston not calling a timeout. Got the ball to Damian Dunn, who, first kind of took too long, didn't look in a hurry enough to get the ball up court. And then when he finally got, up court, went down and turned it over as time ran out. So, it's frustrating in the sense of you couldn't hold on to or even take into halftime that big lead that you had in the first half. It's frustrating that after kind of looking like the game was getting away, you had your rally back only to then lose it in the closing seconds. It's frustrating because Houston did what we needed them to do. He said TCU, they want to turn you over. If they can't turn you over, it's going to be hard for them to score in the half court. Houston only turned it over 7 times, I believe, including the one with 2 seconds to go by Dunn. I think that was number 7 for the entire game. A remarkable performance in terms of holding on to the ball. And you got, fantastic offensive games for the most part from Wani and Damian Dunn, who we really wanted to see that from. But man, just everything else other tthan everything I just said was pretty rough. Jamal Shead missing the first half hurt, wasn't fully himself. LJ Cryer just being a non-factor for the second straight Big 12 road game was pretty tough to handle. And it's frustrating. Like you said, it's you did a lot of things right, and then a lot of things just so catastrophically wrong, more than we thought was possible, that it ultimately didn't quite balance out, and you take your second straight road loss that went down to the final seconds.
Yeah, for me, the big thing that I kind of take away, and I kind of said this last week, was just the offense just seems to be hitting ruts at times. And when they hit a rut, they just can't seem to get out of it. I mean, for your example, Dustin, at 8:14 of the first half, Cougs led 23-11. 12-point lead, you kind of think you're going to keep them at arm's length. And by halftime, it's 31-29. I mean, in an 8-minute period, you scored 8. It's not great, right? 8 minutes and you're averaging a point a minute. That's not exactly what you want to see from your offense there. And then at the same time, your defense is giving up 18 at that same time. I know an 18-8 run doesn't seem like this massive ordeal or anything like that, but when it comes leading you into halftime, going into halftime, it did not feel like we were up 2, right? Going into halftime, I certainly felt like we were down probably 2-4, something like that, and that we just had no momentum. Going back to Jamal Shead, you talked about the second foul. Maybe you'll leave him in there. Jamal Shead's the leader of this team, an experienced guy. And we can argue if we want to. We can watch the video if that second foul was actually a foul. But Jamal came kind of in a little crazy, a little wild going for that challenge. And if I recall, somebody hit the floor, whether it was him or somebody else, and that's going to get called. Just plain and simple, that's just going to get called. And when you have one, you want your experienced guy like Jamal Shead to know better than to do something like that. It's going to get called 1,000% of the time. You just want more from Jamal Shead there. You mentioned it. LJ Cryer just not being LJ Cryer, what we wanted from LJ Cryer. He's our most experienced Big 12 guy, right? He's the only one on this team with Big 12 experience. What?
Malik Wilson also.
Oh yeah, and Malik Wilson. My bad.
No, I texted. I put in the group text he's our early Big 12
and
guy.
I forgot about Malik Wilson too.
I was full of shit because
I forgot Malik Wilson as well.
Erasure of Malik Wilson's 2 months playing in the Big 12 at Texas Tech. Sorry, Bob.
But you are counting on him to kind of carry this team at times, and he just hasn't shown up on the road yet. Another player that I looked up at the scoreboard when he made a 3-pointer in the second half, and I was like, Emmanuel Sharp only has 5 right now. He only had 4 or 5. Guys, this Cougar team offensively isn't going to win games if Emmanuel Sharp has 5 points late in the second half. It's just not going to happen. I don't know what's going on with the offense, but we got to figure it out. This, it's not this panic button or anything like that, but if you are scoring 8 points in 8 minutes, that's almost half of that's a quarter of the game, and you're going practically 7
It's a fifth of the game, but still.
A fifth. Is it?
Yes.
8 minutes. It is. I can math, guys. Let's go.
Your general point, though, your general point is right, though.
Good God. I'm all over the place. See, this is what happens when I travel and podcast. All right. It's just, like you guys said, it's frustrating. You just want to go, what are we doing around here? What are we doing offensively? There were multiple times when our fourth or fifth best guard on our team is just dribbling around and everyone else is just standing around him, watching him go. You're going, there's got to be somebody else that I'd rather have the ball. So, like you guys said, it's just frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of opinions about the officiating of this game, but I fully agree with you said, Bobby. That's the second foul on Jamal Shead, especially. That's a foul every time. Like that, you got to have better from your experienced point guard there. Like there a lot of things to be quibbled about from a Cougar perspective with the officiating in this game. Jamal Shead picking up 2 fouls early, not one of them. Not one of them at all. I think he was good for both the fouls that got there early, and yeah, I think I agree with both of you that really threw the team off not to have him out there for an extended period of time. I think I get not leaving him out there with 14 something to go in the first half with 2 fouls, but I don't know. Once TCU clearly started getting back in it, which I mean, anyone watching could see around the 6-7 minute mark really was cutting into that early deficit you had there. I think it would have been, I think around the under 4, I would have had Jamal Shead back out there. As much as the second foul was uncharacteristically poor for him, I would still trust him to be back out there, acknowledging that to call the 3 of us minnows in basketball knowledge compared to Kelvin Sampson is probably being kind to the 3 of us, but I agree with you, Dustin. I think something he could probably do differently if he's giving us truth serum or giving himself truth serum and talking to us, if he could do it differently. And I think something that was really notable to me in this one, and again, I'm not pushing any panic buttons because of this. What you said, Bobby, 100% correct about the offensive droughts. And you talked last week, I think it was about like the slow starts, and you had good data to back up what you said there. I was less concerned about that because that doesn't even describe every game we've played against a top 40 opponent. But the offensive droughts have happened against every single team we've played with a pulse this year. Like, just let's call a spade a spade. Like, the offense has gone missing for times in all those games, which will sometimes happen when you're playing that caliber of opponent. But also, if it's happening every single time you play someone well inside the Ken Pop top 100, maybe there's some things you need to work on offensively there. But what really stuck out to me besides that was the perimeter defense. This was not a vintage Cougar performance there. TCU did not come into this game as a good 3-point shooting team, a good offensive team, but I think we actually talked about TCU's 3-point shooting probably being their biggest Achilles heel offensively, and they made better than 50% against you. And it wasn't like you throw your hands up because they're hitting just some absolute heat checks. I thought TCU had a lot of good looks. I thought TCU missed at least a couple of looks where there just wasn't a Cougar defender where they needed to be. I think not coincidentally during that period where Jamal Shead was sitting with 2 fouls in the first half. I can't remember who it was on TCU, but somebody missed a pretty open look where I just said to myself in real time, like, whoo, not going to get lucky with that kind of look very much more often. Unfortunately, we did not get lucky with the opponent having this look very often. Can I do a quick rant, guys, about the officiating in this game?
I was about to
my
do
guest.
it, so I'm sure you will.
Y'all be my guest.
I've been the other stuff first, but
I'm not going to press it. I'm not going to say this cost the Cougars the officiating is the officiating. You have to deal with it. You don't have to like it, but I'm not going to come on here and say some absurd shit like, the Big 12 owes U of H a win there. Nah, man. The officiating sucks sometimes. You got to deal with it. Like, the win's the win, the loss is the loss. That's my preface to what I'm about to say. And I think I've been a good boy this season about not bringing up officiating that much when we recap Cougar men's basketball games. But, I mean, once again, Doug Sirmons shows his whole ass in this one. I mean, not saying under no circumstance that TCU should have more free throws or more fouls drawn than the Cougars. I mean, if you look at the season, statistically, TCU has been a better team at drawing fouls and getting to the line than the Cougs. But a 10 foul and 16 free throw attempt discrepancy, that's ridiculous. Like, it shows an amateurish officiating effort that was way too influenced by the home crowd. I think the most unforgivable thing was Sirmons running over, because I don't believe he was the closest official, and teeing up Damian Dunn after he made a basket and
It was
drawing a foul for the and one.
okay.
You were there, so give me your perspective on it. Yeah.
So we're at the game. I'm at the game, right? And the dunk happens, and I'm celebrating, or the play happens. I'm celebrating. I'm pretty excited.
It was a big moment. It was like late in the shot clock.
Yeah.
And they had cut the lead to 1.
Yeah. It was a huge play for us, and I remember celebrating and then just standing up going, what happened? Because like I was too busy celebrating that like I didn't even see him. I didn't even see the incident. And they didn't show it on the replay board. And everybody around me was like, all right, cool, we'll take it. But it was just so just like everyone was like,
yeah,
what just happened?
A complete nothing burger. Dunn did not get overly aggressive with any opposing player, the crowd. He's having the best game of his season. His season's been a tough one so far. Gets a big buck in a big spot. Why the fuck is Doug Sirmons inserting himself here? Like, in a game of such tight margins, again, I'm not going to say something like the refs won this game or something like that. UMH had its chances late in this one, and I think can only look in the mirror as to why this wasn't their first Big 12 road win. But I'll just say, it sucks to see this game get called like it was Saturday and to hear that gas bag, I'm no longer neutral on him, that gas bag, Fran Frischel, say something to the effect of, well, Doug Sirmons isn't going to blow his whistle unless he has a good reason or whatever the exact wording was. Fuck off, dude. Like, and I also get why Kelvin Samuels was upset with Damian Dunn in that spot, because he was very demonstrably upset. Even if it was a very soft call, don't give an overly judicious official a chance to be overly judicious in that spot. A veteran like Dunn does need to know that. And I can hold that thought in my head and all the other ones about how much I hate the idea of Doug Sirmons being a high-level college basketball official.
Can I just ask one question of you guys real quick, Dustin?
Always.
I'm going to let you go. I'm going to release the hounds here in 1 second, but just a quick question. Could you guys see how mad Sampson was? Like, did they show on TV?
Oh, yeah.
He was in that ass. He was chewing him out. I was up there and I was like, oh,
Yeah,
no.
they did an extended shot.
Oh, it was. Oh, I think I texted you guys and I was like, I've never seen Sampson that much in someone's face. It was insane. Dustin, go.
Yeah, no, the only thing I'll say with the tech is like he didn't get in anyone's face. Like Sam said, he didn't get in anyone's face. Like, to me, like they showed the replay. He didn't like stand over anyone. He didn't gesture at anyone. He wasn't inciting the crowd. He turned and looked at his teammate. Like, yeah, maybe he said, I don't know, maybe he said a terrible racial slur or something that Doug Sirmons had no choice but to like, well, hold on, no, I've got to call that. Like, I don't know. I guess there's a handful of words in the English language that you just literally have.
Then why didn't the ref closer to it tee him up then? Why did he run over and?
I don't know, but no.
What was the word, Dustin? What do you think?
I don't know. I'm not going to speculate any further than I already have for obvious reasons. But no, I mean, the thing about losing by 1 point, right, is you can blame the loss on basically anything and be correct, right?
Yep.
Houston lost because Wani missed the front end of that 101. Correct. Houston lost because TCU, even for getting good looks, even I think throughout the season, that even if they get the looks that they got in the game, not going to shoot 51% or whatever they shot very often because they're not a very good three-point shooting team. If TCU just shoots their season average from the three-point line, Houston wins. Jamal Shead doesn't pick up 2 fouls in the first half. Houston wins. Veldek Cryer shows up to this game. Houston wins. So like all of those things are true. And ultimately the reason why you don't want to spend too much time talking about the officials is because you can't control the officials, right? You can only control yourself. You can only control your own team. But, like Doug Sirmons just finding a technical out of his ass for Damian Dunn in that situation, that's a 2-point swing in a game you lost by 1 point. That's not crazy to say like that swung it. That's math. That's how math works, Juwan Roberts, 18 fucking field goal attempts, every single one of them in and around the basket, multiple times just getting shoved to the floor, multiple times just getting raked on the arm while he's shooting it. Like, and I don't know what it is because Wani rarely seems like he gets the benefit of the whistles. Maybe it's because he's a real, just kind of energetic, kind of junkyard dog kind of player that they just kind of, they just don't really see it when other players are kind of shoving him back. I mean, he sure gets called for fouls. He sure gets called for fouls when he plays that way. So you'd like to think that if the other teams are defending him back with the same energy that he's playing with, that maybe one of the 18 times he shot the basketball, prior to the very last one, maybe one of those was a foul. But yeah, being minus 16 free throw attempts in this game, a game against a team that was very much playing hands-on physical defense the same way that Houston was is completely inexplicable. It's completely indefensible. And like, yeah, is it like a real weenie move to be like, well, that cost us the game? I feel like you'd have a hard time arguing that it didn't. And again, in the context that you can make the argument that any number of a couple of dozen things cost us the game, it's hard to not argue that this game being officiated in such a slanted way, like, cost us the game. Because maybe that's a chicken shit thing to say. I would argue it's technically true. You know, again, huge caveats you place on that. And ultimately all you can handle is what you do yourself. But yeah, man, there's some games you kind of walk away from and go, that game wasn't officiated well. I feel like it takes a lot for me at this point in my life to appreciate that, wearing the Cougar tinted glasses that I have, to say, and even with that going, man, it felt like the officials were putting their thumbs on the scale in one direction. But man, this felt like one of those games. And that is one of the reasons we wanted to talk about it last, because all the other stuff is more important. One of the reasons that this loss was so frustrating was because it felt like Houston was playing having an uphill battle against the slanted court.
I was just gonna say real quick, the last point that I was frustrating, because those two big plays, or two big, I guess, happenings in the last minute of this game, Wani missing the front end of the 1-and-1, and Damian Dunn ultimately turning the ball over when the Cougs had the ball last to end the game. It's frustrating because you're not even in that situation without those guys. You're not even in it without Wani having, I think, his best offensive game of the season. You're not in this without Damian Dunn keeping the first half post-shed, getting 2 fouls from getting even uglier. Is Damian Dunn having, I think, his best all-around game of the season. That's 2 of the last 3 from him, which is an exciting trend, because I think you add Damian Dunn to LJ Cryer and Emmanuel Sharp actually sometimes making shots, then this is a really difficult team to deal with. But I just hate that the game swung on those 2 points, because those 2 guys were so important to getting there. And that just kind of completes the frustrating circle for me. Bobby, sorry.
Yeah.
I jumped in there.
I just wanted to go back to the free throws, right? So obviously I was surrounded by TCU fans. I was just surrounded by them because I bought my ticket day of. I had every age group around me, all that kind of stuff. And the guys in front of me, they were like, we could just make some free throws. This would be like a 10-point game. And I was like, you guys have shot 15 more than us. Of course it would be if you made them. Let's go ahead and just kind of acknowledge this. But with that being said, I just want to give a shout out to the TCU fans. I actually had a really good time at their arena. Their fans were super cool. Good atmosphere. I think I told you guys it was probably 90-95% full when you asked me at tip off. I think it filled in pretty well. Even up to damn near 100%. It was, and the fans in front of me, we were having some fun little banter. They do this kind of cool thing when at the beginning of the game, they do intros and everyone stands up. And then when they tell you to sit down when the opposing team scores for the first time, they win the opening tip, they hit their 3-pointer. We go down, we score on our first possession, and I just get to be like, all right, let's all sit down and enjoy the game now. And so we do that. We're talking smack back and forth during the game. It was really fun. And then when they hit their bucket and it takes them up, I'm kind of like, oh no, we go down, turnover. They start mobbing me in a really fun way. I had a really good time with the TCU fans. I've always kind of enjoyed going to TCU games growing up in DFW. So just a shout out to the TCU fans. Even when we were winning, they were very gracious while we were winning. It was a really fun experience. So, I highly recommend you go check out a game at,
Skullmeyer? Is it Schollmeyer?
Yeah, I think that's how you pronounce it. I wasn't even going to try and butcher it, but, it's, as Sam called it, we have Hoffines at home. It's a circular arena, but they did a lot of really cool renovations when they got into the Big 12. So it's also their Hall of Fame. So you can go walk through, see some really cool trophies, see some really cool stuff like that. And the other really weird part, kind of cool though, is their weight room is attached to the arena. And as I saw that, Sam.
Sorry, my bad.
As you're walking around, you can actually see into the weight room. It's kind of cool. So if you ever want to make the 4-hour drive, I highly recommend it.
All right. We're moving on to some future-facing Cougar games after that hearty endorsement of the TCU men's basketball game day experience.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's start. We got, I think, 3 games to preview, as our episode next week will be on Wednesday. So We've got this week's midweek game, this coming weekend's game, and then next Tuesday's game. We're all going to jump into all three of those here. Starting with tomorrow evening, as we're recording this on Tuesday night, Houston, at this time tomorrow, will be playing host to Texas Tech at the Fertitta Center. Tech in year one of the Grant McCasland era, who took the Tech job after a successful run at North Texas. The Red Raiders come into this one on a 9-game winning streak, which has seen them improve the record to 14-2, including a 3-0 start to Big 12 play with wins over UT Austin, Oklahoma State, and Kansas State. That 3-0 record makes them one of two remaining undefeated teams in Big 12 play alongside Baylor. Their only top 100 wins on the year as of this moment, a non-conference win over a pretty mediocre Michigan team, and the aforementioned wins over the Longhorns and the Wildcats as of late. And this is only their third road game of the year. They had the non-conference overtime loss at Butler, and then the win over the Longhorns that I'll go ahead and mention for a third time because it's pretty funny. And they've been pretty strong on both sides of the ball, but not really like wildly dominant on either. I think that maybe the number one thing that scares me the most with this team, Sam, is the potential for the free throw line to be a factor yet again, because they are both above average at getting to the line, excellent at making their free throws once they get there. They shoot 78% as a team, and also top 15 in the country at not sending opponents to the line. So after back-to-back games where the free throw line and who goes there how many times has been a point of contention, this feels like a potential third game in a row where that could be true.
Yeah, and worth some background on their coach. Grant McCasland comes over to the Red Raiders after a really successful 6-year stint at UNT, where the Mean Green were, I think, pretty consistently the top Conference USA program. Oversaw a big upset of Purdue in the 21 tournament, led them to the most recent NIT championship last spring. Was a longtime assistant or Scott Drew at Baylor, a program that has had a number of former assistants, become successful college head coaches. And for all of Tech's recent men's basketball success, I mean, this is a team less than 5 years ago that was in the national championship game. This wasn't an easy situation for him to step into. The last head coach, Mark Adams, who succeeded Chris Beard, who went to the Longhorns and had his own really disastrous end to that time there, had an incredible first year, but really things fell apart in his second year there. Adams was put on administrative leave last March for a racially insensitive remark to a player, ultimately resigned at the end of that season, with the Red Raiders dead last in the Big 12 standings. As often happens in a coaching change, a lot of the existing roster exited, and there's only 4 guys who played any kind of role in last year's Texas Tech team here, still part of that program. I would say Pop Isaacs being the only one of that group who I think could be described as a leading player on the current Texas Tech team, not to diminish the contributions of guys like Robert Jennings and Kerwin Walton. I think Walton in particular has been a nice shooter for them off the bench, but Isaacs is the only big role player who was on this team last year. I thought McCasland did a really good job of making that team in the transfer portal. Joe Toussaint comes in, a really good veteran Big 12 guard, kind of part of West Virginia's mini exodus with everything that happened with Bob Huggins. You brought in a couple of mid-major guys who are transferring up. Darian Williams, who was the Mountain West Freshman of the Year last year at Nevada Reno. Chance McMillan, who was an all-conference guy at Grand Canyon. I think the most important glue guy has been their super senior big man, Warren Washington, who came over from Arizona State. I think that'll be a super important matchup for the Cougs to keep him from being a really efficient big man, which I think he's done a good job of for the Red Raiders this year. Like you said, Dustin, an incredibly good team at defending without fouling and sending opponents to the free throw line. Not a super active team defensively, but really you kind of look on both ends of the court. There's not a lot of things that Texas Tech does badly. Like there's not really one thing where like, oh, they're so good at this, but not really anything where like, oh, they're really bad at X or they're not so great at Y. They're just very competent across the board. And yes, some of that I think is what you alluded to, Dustin. Not the strongest out of conference schedule, though. I think you don't have to blame McCasland for not loading up on a really tough non-conference in a roster that's really new, first season, I think in a long-term build. They do come in to tomorrow night's game on a 9-game winning streak, which I think is certainly helped by the fact that, like you said, they didn't play anyone tougher than 173rd nationally during this streak before opening Big 12 play, according to KenPom. But, I mean, like you said, mentioned it for the 4th time, beat the Longhorns in Austin, found a way to win at home while they weren't playing their best basketball against a pesky K-State team. I think nothing I say here should be interpreted as dismissive of this Red Raiders team. I think this is a game U of H should win, but this is not a team the Cougs can take for granted in any sense. And I'm excited to see this series finally played on a team's home court. I mean, I feel like we saw a decent amount of the Red Raiders when Chris Beard was there, but it was always neutral site. So excited for this in-state thing to actually be played in someone's on-campus arena. I think it's going to be cool.
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys heard, but Texas Tech beat the Longhorns.
Did they?
I thought that was pretty interesting when I was looking at it.
I
Sam,
watched that one
point-
live, actually. I was gonna say that was a really, if you're a Longhorn hater, chicken soup for your soul that second half, because it was a really close back and forth game in the first half, and just like Grant McCasland, stunner of stunners, outcoached the guy who was a career mediocre coach at UTEP and Fresno. But another story for when we talk about that team later this season.
Absolutely. So, Sam, you pointed out a guy that, kind of looking through their roster has me a little concerned, and that's Warren Washington. One thing that this Cougar team doesn't have much of is size. And anytime you face a 7-footer who is averaging just under a double-double, it's concerning, right? We saw Wani really use some of his size and strength in the last game, and I don't know if he's going to be able to do it against Warren Washington. So it's going to be interesting to kind of watch the big man matchup. I know we love to talk about the 3-ball and efficiency and all those kind of things, but watching Warren Washington is going to be an interesting thing to kind of track as we go through the game. Sam, you also said it, and you can look at their KenPom rankings in terms of they don't do anything super well, they don't do anything poorly. They're 31st offensively, 43rd in KenPom defensively, and that leads to you being pretty good. Leads to you being a top 30 team, a team that should scare U of H coming in to the Fertitta Center. But you would hope, now that we're back at the friendly confines of the Fertitta Center, that U of H does what U of H does and can come out and get a dub in this game.
Yeah, as much as we talked about how hard it is to play in the Big 12 over the last couple of games that Houston's played at Iowa State and at TCU, now's the time again. Texas Tech's a good team. They I don't know if you guys know this. They went into Austin and they beat the Longhorns. They're a good team. But when you're a Big 12 team and you're at home, these are the games you're supposed to win. Even against a good team, even against a team that really doesn't have any, like we talked about, any really glaring weaknesses. This is still a good team. So that is life in the Big 12. We say, I feel like that is the expression that we're going to use the most this year, but that's life in the Big 12, right? Even when you have your bounce back, get right, hey, we really need to win this game, it's still against a team that this is probably an NCAA tournament team. This is a team that KenPom says they're 30th right now. So it's still a good team. So definitely a challenge. Definitely a game when, I don't know if this is quite the classic, even a 1-point win is you're happy with, but I mean, at this point you just need a win. So I think at this point, a win of any, would I be thrilled with the 1-point win at home over Texas Tech? Not really. Would that really make me feel great about the team? Not necessarily, but man, I might take it if you offered it at this point, just because you need a win of any variety at this point.
Yeah, and it's you were saying how you're now at home. It's time for the Texas Tech podcast to go, oh man, if we just got a 1-point win in Houston, it would be so amazing. Like, we're now the home team that when we say Big 12 conference road games are difficult, we're the difficult road game. It's you have to be the difficult road game for a team now.
I was going to say, I'm just going to manifest John Higgins or one of the other big name officials giving us a stupid free throw advantage in this game. I know we're not the best free throw shooting team, but I wouldn't mind that. I wouldn't mind us finally getting the benefit of what we've seen to different degrees over our last 2 road games.
Look, if we want to get 16 more free throws than the other team and make more than the other team attempted still, I'm okay with it. You can sign me up for that one.
Yeah, twist my arm.
Houston will get back-to-back home games, as after hosting Tech on Wednesday, they'll be hosting the Knights of the University of Central Florida on Saturday afternoon. UCF in year 8 of the Johnny Dawkins era, still looking for NCAA tournament appearance number 2 of the Johnny Dawkins era. And really, I think they're one of maybe 3 teams, I would say, that came into Big 12 play who didn't have clear-cut, should be in contention for the NCAA tournament kind of vibes around them. Not that I think all 11 were going to make it, but at least, all 11 or the other 11, I think were kind of in contention, aside from probably UCF, West Virginia, and Oklahoma State. But nonetheless, I think the reason for that is that they took a real bad loss to Stetson in non-conference play. They had no top 100 wins in non-conference play. And then they opened up conference play with a 25-point loss at Kansas State. And you were kind of going, okay, this is a clear-cut, one of the bottom 3 teams in the Big 12, like we thought. So, of course, they followed that up by beating the Kansas Jayhawks in their first ever Big 12 home game. They did follow that up most recently with another 5-point loss to BYU at home, which kind of takes a little bit of the wind out of their sails. They will also be in Austin to face the Longhorns before coming to Houston this weekend. So yeah, while that Kansas win looks real nice, and it's one that I'd be happy to mention as many times as we mentioned Texas Tech beating the Longhorns, it's also extremely funny and extremely enjoyable. And it's one of those okay, we're taking some lumps, but you know what? No one's not taking. I guess Baylor and Tech haven't taken any lumps thus far, but for the most part, it's hey, everyone's going to take their lumps. Not even Kansas gets to be on the high perch of not taking a frustrating loss up until this point. But yeah, I think that win is real fun and everything. It is also still notable. They have 5 losses on the year, including a couple of not so great losses. And as of right now, per KenPom, their second best win is Charlotte. So that's not a great place to be on January 16th. But they are a strong defensive team. I think that is one thing that really stands out, especially on the interior where they have 7-foot shot blocking machine, Ibrahima Diallo. They rebound well. They turn opponents over well. But man, offensively, they have just struggled so much to make shots. They're ranked in the 250s or worse in shooting percentage from 3, from 2, and from the line. Not a great place to be. So, Bobby, this is Houston's second easiest remaining home game, right? It's the one you still have to show up to. Ask Kansas. You have to show up if you want to beat UCF. But even more so than the Texas Tech game, this one really has to be a win at home.
Yeah, absolutely. That's pretty much what I have in my notes is you have to win this game. This is a game that you can't come in and really play poorly in, or this is your best opportunity to play a B+ game and still come away with a win. Dustin, you pointed out they are just so bad offensively, rank 192 in KenPom. When you have the defense that the University of Houston does, and you are playing a team that is 192, this may be the game as much as we've talked about our offensive struggles this year. This may be the game where you can afford to have an offensive struggle here and there. And you're not going to play perfect basketball against them, especially like you said, Ibrahima Diallo. Did I say that right? Diallo. Shot blocking machine, going to clog the middle. 17th in KenPom defensively. So you're going to have stretches against the top 20 defensive team that you are going to not score. Luckily, and hopefully your defense can come through and really, really show up and stop them. When you can't score, when their defense is showing up, your defense has to show up as well.
Yeah, the reason UCF was able to get that home upset, in addition to having, I think, a really great home atmosphere in Orlando, it shouldn't surprise anyone that UCF got a good crowd out there for a big name opponent, was somebody who I think has been a useful player for them, but has not really impacted things in this way. And I'm referring to Jalen Sellers here, who came in, Ball State transfer, guy who I was really intrigued by in the preseason, was very productive at the MAC level, obviously taking a pretty big step up to the Big 12, but I think has been a useful player for them, but has really struggled with his outside shot, something he was actually quite good at a level below this one, and goes 4 for 7 from 3 against Kansas. You get a guy like that having an out of his skin performance, that's going to help you get an upset that probably very few people have projected in the preseason, in addition to the stuff that I think you guys have highlighted that UCF does well, being a very good defensive team, being a very good offensive rebounding team, a defensive team, I think in a lot of ways like the Cougars, that can really create a lot of havoc for their opponents. And I think it's a pretty impressive coaching job by Johnny Dawkins. We had our little off-season thing this past summer where we had on various people from podcasts of the other Big 12 schools, including UCF, our network friends, the Sons of UCF. I had Adam on from there and asked him kind of at the tail end about basketball, and he kind of gave me a really good, thoughtful answer. He's like, Sam, I think if you gave me 4 Big 12 wins right now, I would take it. That was kind of, I don't know if I'm quoting him exactly on that, but had very modest expectations. So no matter the circumstances, to go in there and beat this Kansas team, I think really impressive for Dawkins, because this team off of last year's team lost Taylor Hendricks, their highest ever draft pick, a lottery guy, lost a lot of key guys, really Darius Johnson and CJ Walker, who's missed a lot of this season injured, were really the only continuity pieces from last season. So you're going to the Big 12 with arguably a less talented roster than a year ago. And I think Johnny Dawkins is getting significantly more out of this year's roster than last year's. I think this is a better team, even without the lottery pick talent. Hendricks there with him, Sellers, who I mentioned, Darius Johnson, CJ Walker's been back in the last 5 games, and Diallo, who I think a good taco, Taco Fall, I don't want to make that comp, lightly because Taco Fall is a very unique college player, but I think Diallo absolutely is a good comp. Marcellus Avery, a veteran guy who came over from New Mexico State as well, has given them some desperately needed outside shooting from a team that's just not great. I have a soft spot for teams that are absolutely terrible on the balance of the season in one phase of their game and excellent in another. Dustin, I think the last 2 years before this one of Iowa State men's basketball is a good example of that. The flip side, Iowa basketball, absolutely very defensive optional while being just almost a virtuoso offensive team at times. So I think this one needs to be a Cougar win. I would not be happy with a 1 point Cougar win here. I think this one needs to be style points, even if I think the game in Orlando, which is actually our last home regular season trip, definitely worries me more than it did a few weeks ago. But even acknowledging the things this team does well, I think this needs to be a Cougar win. This needs to be a Cougar win with some level of style points. Doesn't have to be a repeat of West Virginia, but I would like a double-digit margin or at least a stress-free Cougar win this coming weekend.
Yeah, my only other X factor is just making sure Houston's bigs don't get into too much foul trouble on this one, because we mentioned Diallo, you mentioned CJ Walker, who, hasn't really, I think, gotten fully healthy, but played the last 5, started the last 2. They're clearly trusting him more and more. But he's someone who's got some size at the 4. They play him and Diallo together a lot. You can't be running a 4-guard lineup out there when they've got Diallo and Walker out there. You're going to have 2 of the 3 of, Tugler and Wani and Javier. So I think keeping those guys out of foul trouble so that you can match up body for body with UCF when they've got those 2 guys down low, I think it's going to be something big for Houston as well. And then let's see, next Tuesday, also will be before our next podcast, Houston will be on the road for another Big 12, looking for their first Big 12 road game. They'll be at BYU. The BYU Cougars, like the Houston Cougars, are beloved by the metrics, despite for them a non-conference campaign that included, a loss to a very good Utah team, which is pretty understandable, but only really one win over an NCAA tournament caliber team, which was when they beat San Diego State at home way back in their second game of the year. And then they turned around and opened Big 12 play with back-to-back 9-point losses at home to Cincinnati and on the road at Baylor before rallying to beat UCF in Orlando in their most recent game for their first ever Big 12 win. And man, their Big 12 road at 1-2 isn't getting any easier. Their next 3 games are home versus Iowa State, at Texas Tech, and home versus Houston. So while
you can say that about everybody in the conference.
That is true. Even you can say that about everybody, but nonetheless for BYU, playing 5 consecutive quad 1 or tier A games according to Ken Pom, even by Big 12 standards, that's pretty brutal. Yeah. So I assume that they're going to start winning games at some point. I assume that this is a team that'll probably end up in the NCAA tournament at some point, and I expect the metrics aren't going to be that wrong, and I guess that's why I have faith in them. But this is a team with 1 top 70 win, and it happened over 3 months ago at this point. So, really, really interesting team in terms of they just rebound like crazy. They're both, I think, top 10 or 11 in the country in both offensive and defensive effective field goal percentage. So a team that just makes a lot of buckets and does not allow opponents to make a lot of buckets. But yeah, a team that I think is looking a little shaky in Big 12 play, especially that home win over, losing at Baylor, I don't think is too understandable, but the 9-point home loss to Cincinnati, I think.
11.
You're trying to give them 2 points. Yeah.
You're right. I'm trying to give them 2 points. It was a double digit. The Baylor was 9 points. Cincinnati was 11. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of a rough loss. That's, and again, is Cincinnati a bad team? No. Like, is that a complete, should that be a season crusher for anybody? No. But yeah, just real interesting team in the way that, shoot just a huge number of threes. They're one of the top, I believe, 3rd in the country in terms of over half of their shots have come from beyond the 3-point line. I guess the beautiful news is they're one of the lowest teams in the country in terms of getting to the free throw line because they shoot so many damn threes. So for at least one game, we won't have to worry about, hopefully, knock on wood, sending them to the free throw line a ton. But man, Sam, just especially after that TCU, we talked about TCU getting a lot of good looks at 3. This is a team that moves the ball real well, and if we give them a bunch of good looks at 3, they are going to both find those looks and probably make them.
Yeah, that was my first point there, is that it's great that you're facing an opponent that, although, again, we will test to see how persuasive the crowd in Provo is next Tuesday to the officials, but a team that just statistically is just not going to go to the free throw line very often, but you also cannot afford to have the same perimeter defensive effort that you had against TCU, because if you do that, it's BYU. they're going to make well over 50%, and this game is going to be the least close of all your road games. That's how good this team is on the perimeter. And I think what's also really notable is that they have a lot of size, and it's not just the big man size. I mean, they have Ali Khalifa and Noah Waterman, who are one of the taller front courts you're going to see this year. But I think I'm more referring to the fact that they just have so many rotation guys who are between like 6'4" and 6'7". They're going to throw more length than the Cougars are. The Cougars are going to have to make up in other areas for the fact that not only is this team a really good 3-point shooting team, like you said, but they're going to throw a lot of size and length. And that, as great as they've been offensively at times, I think if anything, they've been a better team defense. I mean, there's a reason why it's not just the friendlier parts of the non-conference schedule that they are a top 10 team nationally in opponent 3-point percentage allowed, that they can throw a lot of length to the perimeter. And I think I'm understating it to say U of H has not been a very good 3-point shooting team in our little sample size of 2 road games so far. Is that going to be easier against an opponent that's shown themselves to be quite good at home and quite good at defending the perimeter? No, don't anticipate that. And I think, again, you're gonna have to hope that you get a crew that isn't going to give BYU more than their average amount of trips to the free throw line. I mean, and I think deal with the fact that you have guys like Trevin Nell, who's been a revelation for them. Like, he missed all of last season, and I think you don't want to ever, I guess, give one player an outsized amount of credit in a team game like basketball, but not having Trevin Nell is the difference between the biggest difference, at least in terms of individual level, to why this team went from being a not that great West Coast Conference team to being, whether you think the metrics are inflating them or not, a good, at least top half of the Big 12 team. One of the teams I think that's been one of the biggest surprises in a positive way in the current season. So a lot of challenging things there. I think you're hoping that you come in off of 2 home wins with some momentum behind you from playing at home and deal with a team that I think can present just so many different challenges. I made it through that entire thing without using like the Mormon tropes. So they're a veteran team. Like you really can't. You have a hard time defending guys who have a wife and 2 kids at home. Let me tell you. All right, dang it, made it. You were so close, all this way. I was so close.
You're so close, man.
I hope I'm going to be there in person. I'm about 5 hours away here in Las Vegas.
Nice.
I've actually never been north of like Cedar City, which is still like the southern part of Utah. So I'm excited for my maiden voyage to the northern part of Utah here in a week, and just see what I think is a pretty awesome home environment there in Provo. I've seen a lot of it on TV. I'm excited to get to witness it firsthand in person.
Yeah, not a ton to add on this preview of what you guys talked about with BYU. Big concern is after this TCU game, how well TCU, they weren't very good at the 3-pointer coming into the game, and they shot over 50% from beyond the arc. If you're going to play a team that shoots the 3 ball as well as BYU, if you have anything close to that performance that you saw versus TCU, we could be in for a very, very, very long night, fellas.
All right, moving along to the women's hoops. Speaking of playing BYU in basketball, the Cougar women's team, you may remember at the very end of our last episode, we were like live podcasting the women's basketball game. And I think the last thing we said, like right before we signed off, was that they were up 21-12 at the end of the first quarter, and they used that as the basis by which they beat the BYU Cougars for their first ever Big 12 win. Final score of 79-69. After that 9-point lead at the end of the first quarter, BYU actually did rally. They got within 1 in the second quarter, but Houston counter rallied. They pushed the lead back to 9 at halftime. The only time it got anything like uncomfortably close in the second half was when BYU hit a 3 to pull within 4 points with 4.5 minutes to go. But Cameron Jones immediately hit a 3 of her own for Houston to push it back to 7. And then on Houston's next possession, Peyton McFarland completed a 3-point play to put some additional distance between them and the other Cougars. And that was that, as Houston was able to finish it off with a double-digit home win. And, I think the 2 things that really excited me about this one were that, 2 players we really wanted to see have big offensive games did so in Layla Blair, who had an efficient 20 points in this one. And then Brittany Onyeje, someone who's been in the program for a while, who we've known is capable of scoring points, but just hasn't really, for whatever reason, been able to show that this year. Hadn't scored in double figures since the second game of the season. She had 16 in this one to really help Houston get that first Big 12 win. But the other thing for me that was really so big, Bobby, was turnovers, because we've talked a lot about how that's kind of where Houston's going to hang their hat, and can they or can they not win Big 12 games that way? They did. They beat BYU 25-13 in turnovers. They were plus 16, Bobby, points off turnovers in a game that they won by 10.
Hey, I've been preaching that all season is if this team wins with their full court press and their high energy defense, they're going to have to turn the other team over. And they won the turnover battle by almost double. And the other thing I've been preaching is, can this team score? 79 points is plenty of points to win in the Big 12. If you're getting turnovers, that's the Huey way of winning, right? Get turnovers, make easy buckets, score enough points where if your press gets broken every so often, you're going to do well enough. And to your point, Dustin, we did everything the Cougars want to do to win. Out rebounded by 12, but when you have that many points off turnovers, you can afford to give up that many rebounds. The defensive effort was great. Offensively, shot 40% from three. Haven't seen that in a very long time from this Cougar women's basketball team. So super excited about that. Super excited that we got our first Big 12 win. That it feels really nice because we were talking just 2 episodes ago. Like, can this team even really get? Are they going to go over in conference? And they're not. So super excited about this. Just there's really no other way to describe how I felt. And as we were watching this, I mean, we signed off and I go to the living room and I was like, all right, time to put this on. And you put this on and you're just slowly watching, just begging, right? You're just like, please just finish this one. I'm begging you finish this one. And like you said, when it gets down to 4 with about 4.5 left, you're kind of going, no. And then you pull away, win by 10. Gotta love it.
Yeah, BYU at home felt like something close to a must-win. I think the second quarter of this game was really important. Wasn't perfect by any means. I mean, BYU shot 60% from the field in the second, cut the U of H lead to as little as 21-20 around the second quarter media timeout. And I don't want to speak for you guys, but when I was following this one live, that's when I started thinking, okay, here we go again. This team has a great start, can't sustain it. Game gets away from them in the later stages of the second half. And I'm really happy to say I could have been more wrong. U of H, at that point where BYU cut to 1 point, went on a 10-0 run over the next 3-ish minutes and went to the locker room by a much more comfortable margin. I think what also encourages me is that in that second quarter, U of H by no definition shot well, but found a way to go into the half with a good sized lead by doing good things in the margins, like going a perfect 6 of 6 from the charity stripe, 3 of 3 from your front court players, Maria Patterson and Logan McNeil. Also really nice to see U of H's lone freshman, Kiera Merchant. She was the one that sparked the U of H offense when BYU cut it to 1 point in the second quarter. Drew a foul in a 3-point attempt, made all 3 of her freebies, and that sequence ended up being Merchant's only 5 points, but you look back at this game, you may not notice in the box score, but those are 5 really critical points. And BYU didn't go quietly, kind of like you said, Dustin, but ultimately U of H never lost the lead. And I think the sequence that really broke BYU's resolve and allowed the Cougs to put that first Big 12 win away came right after, like you talked about, when BYU cut the lead to 4. And then you had just, the very next possession, Cameron Jones nails a 3-pointer to put the Cougs back up 7. And the Cougs with the U never really got that close again. You had Layla Blair also going a perfect 7 of 7 from the free throw line after missing her first attempt in the fourth, part of a really strong game high 20-point performance. Bradonje, like you said, was really important to getting that early lead. And it's just nice to see this team do a good job getting to the free throw line and making most of them. That's winning basketball right there. That's not something we've always seen from this team. Really impressed with the balance. You had 5 different Cougars with at least 8 points. You saw the team, like you said, Bobby, I think win this game by playing their brand of basketball. You had a plus 16 advantage in points off turnovers, plus 12 in terms of number of turnovers forced. You look at the box score, BYU shot a really nice percentage, but that doesn't really matter as much when you turn an opponent over as often as the Cougars did on Wednesday. Just really happy for these young women and Coach Huey getting that first Big 12 win before getting too deep in conference play and taking care of business in a game that I think the 3 of us saw was kind of ripe for the picking.
Yeah, and then not only that, but they kept it going in a game that I think we thought was going to be more of a challenge, and it didn't necessarily look like one when Houston had a similar margin of victory, beating TCU to make it a 2-game winning streak. Final score of 77-66. Man, Layla Blair, have yourself a game.
Woo, woo.
Had a career high 33 points on 11 of 17 shooting with 0 turnovers. Just one of the most impressive, single player, single game performances we've seen from this program in the last several years. This is a TCU team that was reeling a bit, having lost 3 straight after the 14-0 start to their season, but this is still a good TCU team. This is still easily Houston's best win of the year. This is still a win that a couple of weeks ago seemed unlikely, if not impossible, for this team to pick up. So kind of like the BYU win, Houston won this one by dominating a quarter, this time the second quarter, and then playing essentially TCU even for the other 3. They tied 2020 after the first quarter. And I remember thinking at 2020, I remember again, we'll go ahead and expose our own, bad fandom here, because I remember thinking oh man, Houston might be in trouble. It's 2020, but they might be in trouble because Layla Blair had, I believe, 15 of those 20 points. And you go, okay, she's not going to score 60 in this game. So no one besides her is scoring. Houston doesn't look like they're going to get very many stops. It looks like TCU is just scoring easily, and Layla Blair played out of her mind for a quarter to keep it tied. So doesn't look great. Not only was I wrong, I was very wrong immediately starting with quarter number 2 because dominated the second quarter, 21-9. They never let TCU back in it. It was never closer than 7 in the second half. Only got within single digits in the fourth quarter right at the very end when the game was already well over. So yeah, really, really exciting win. And, we talked, a couple weeks ago, not having faith in this team. We talked a couple weeks ago about how Layla Blair just hadn't shown up enough in the big games. And man, did she ever just have herself a week, first in the BYU game and then the TCU game with the career high there as well. And then, Sam, for the second game in a row, they won their way with turnovers, 24-9 edge in turnovers, 26-9 edge in points off turnovers, a 17-point margin in a game that you won by 11.
Yeah, and the absence of TCU's super senior post player Sedona Prince definitely loomed large. Prince had been incredibly productive for the Frogs in the early season, averaged over 20 points and over 10 rebounds per game. But I will also note that the Cougar front court players did a good job on TCU's other veteran high-usage post player, Agnes Emanopu, who was held to 7 points on 3 of 11 shooting. I think one of her worst shooting performances of the current season. And this game was definitely the Layla Blair show in a lot of ways. And the box score will show you Layla Blair had an outstanding game, 33 points, 11 to 17 shooting. Can't really say enough, even though we've said a lot about it already. But I still think you saw a team effort when the Cougs blew that game open in the second quarter. Of course, a ton of Layla Blair in there, but you also had Bria Patterson and Malia Johnson hitting big shots to give the Cougars that double-digit halftime lead. You also had just a game full of outstanding team defense, even as TCU shot the ball pretty well in the second half. The Cougars were still doing such a good job turning the Frogs over, taking care of the ball themselves, which I think was really notable. It's nice when you turn an opponent over 24 times, but it's really nice when you do that and just do an incredible job taking care of the ball when you play at such a fast tempo like the Cougs are doing. And again, second game in a row, Cougs did really good things on the margins, made a better percentage of their free throws on a similar number of attempts, but also being plus 17 in points off turnovers, plus 15 in number of turnovers forced. This is such a tougher league than the one you came from, so I certainly savored watching the closing minutes of now 2 conference games in a row where a U of H win really wasn't in any kind of doubt. I mentioned the great defensive effort on Agnes Emanopu, but I think also worth mentioning the awesome job the Coug guards did on TCU's high usage guard, Madison Connor. She'd have her near her season average of 20 points, but did it on not that great 5 of 16 from the field and 7 turnovers. Also, we'll note maybe some of this is just a fluke of the schedule makers, but I thought it was cool that the Cougars were the first of the newcomer Big 12 schools to beat any of the incumbent schools in women's basketball. Not just to get your second conference win, but to do so with not if it's a second conference win and it's late February, it hits a little different than getting your second conference win in the first 5 games. I think we were on the more negative side and not wrong in being so when we talked about this team recently, but really just nice to have the kind of week that you had and to beat TCU as emphatically as you did. I think we would have been, not to overuse this trope in this episode, we would have been, I think, happy with a small margin win in this game to have the Cougars pretty comprehensively beat this opponent. Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, and you guys touched on a lot of the things that I was going to touch on, but when you look at a couple of things stood out to me. Second quarter, when we absolutely blew this game open, Cougs went 0 of 5 from 3-point range. Shot 0% in the second quarter while outscoring their opponent by 12. If you take away the 3-pointers, they went 7 of 10 from the field. Cougs, that's what they have needed to do all season is simply just make buckets. 0 of 5 from 3-pointer. Think if you make 2 of those, right? Third quarter, same thing, guys. 0 of 6 from 3 points in the third quarter. You're still able to play them fairly even. You take away the 3-pointers there, you go 5 of 10 from the field, shoot 50%. That's pretty good. You can give me 70% followed up by 50% from the field. If you take out the 3-pointers on your 2-point shots, you're going to win some games that way. Just plain and simple. Cougs, as you guys said, won their way, and it's super exciting to see.
So the Cougs will look to continue their positive play on Wednesday when they will be at West Virginia to face the Mountaineers. Mountaineers started the season 13-0, including opening Big 12 play with wins over Kansas and Cincinnati, or suffering back-to-back losses to UT Austin and Iowa State. They did bounce back with a 17-point road win over UCF in their most recent game to improve to 3-2 in Big 12 conference play. 27th in the current net rankings, placing them 11 spots ahead of the TCU team that, like we mentioned, is by a pretty wide margin Houston's best win of the year, and that TCU one was at home this game in Morgantown, so it definitely tells you this one's going to be a challenge for even if Houston does keep playing as well as we've seen them the last couple of games. Even I think they have to play that well just to make this a close competitive game that they might have a chance in. So, this is a similar team talent-wise, at least the net would say so, to the Wazoo team that smothered Houston. And I think those are probably the most similar. That's probably the most similar game that Houston's played, right, up until this point. It's a team that you have to kind of go far to get to. It's kind of in a remote location once you get there. It's going to be a raucous crowd. It's kind of like a borderline top 25 team. Really a lot of similarities, I think, to the Wazoo game. And Houston got absolutely blown out in that game, remember? I think that we all want to think that this Houston team is kind of turning things around and is going to play better the rest of the season than they did over kind of the first half. So in that sense, I think this makes this game a really good test of how far Houston's come. It's not to say that they have to win this game or I'm going to completely, jump off of the bandwagon now that I finally set a foot back on it after the last couple of games. But I think we definitely want to see in some form or fashion that 2-game winning streak that Houston has put together is also going to translate to even playing some higher tier teams still.
Yeah, one of the big things I've kind of noticed as you're going through their statistics and things like that is their guard combo of J.J. Quinterly and Jordan Harrison put the ball in the bucket. And it's going to be really interesting to see how the Cougs can handle those two players. Will their defense be able to affect somebody like J.J. Quinterly, who doesn't seem to turn the ball over very often and can seem to make plays? She just hit her 1,000-point marker, so that's kind of cool. So she can put the ball in the bucket. This West Virginia team, like you said, Dustin, compares pretty well to the Wazoo game and how it is going to play out. One that you don't exactly expect the Cougs to win, but you like to see them if they are kind of turning that tide and really moving forward. A game that you want to see them at least be competitive in. If we get another Middle Tennessee State or something like that, it's going to be pretty disappointing based off just what we saw in the last week.
Something you said just triggered something in my mind, Bobby. A quick shout out to Bria Patterson of the Cougars for getting the 1,000-point mark after the last game. So
good point.
Very, very quick aside there. Meant to mention in the last section. Did not. Shout out to Bria there. Quick background on West Virginia's head coach, first-year guy, Mark Kellogg, was previously a super successful mid-major head coach at Stephen F. Austin. Before that was super successful at the Division II level. Didn't inherit a destitute program here. West Virginia went to last year's NCAA tournament before their previous coach left after 1 year in the job to take the head coaching job at the University of Minnesota. But I think anytime you can manage a coaching transition in the current era and look as good as West Virginia has in the current season, I think big credit to Kellogg and his staff. I mean, it shouldn't be too surprising given how successful he's been over his career at multiple levels, but still notable nonetheless. Like you said, Bobby, first, J.J. Quinterly, really awesome. One of the very best guards the Cougars going to see this year. First team all Big 12 selection last season, leads the Mountaineers in points for at least the second straight season. This Mountaineer team is going to volume shoot from 3-point range, really try and force turnovers and play quick. I mean, in a lot of ways that mirrors what the Cougs like to do to their opponents. And I think if anything in this one works to U of H's favor, West Virginia only starts one player listed over 6 foot in that group of, because I think Kellogg's had the same 5 starters all 16 of their games. That one starter over 6 foot, Kylie Blackston, is only averaging about 6.5 points per game. And we've seen previous opponents like Wazoo, Middle Tennessee State, K-State as well, really punish the Cougars with high-level front court players. And It's not that West Virginia doesn't present challenges, but maybe on the most basic level, West Virginia wants to play a game similar-ish to the one that U of H will want to play. I think, like you guys, just echoing what you said, ultimately, I just want to see this team compete. You didn't do that against a similarly profiled opponent last time against Wazoo. That's all I want to see here. I'm not concerned if they lose this game. This is going to be one of the tougher games you have on the remaining schedule. I just want to see them compete. I want this game not to be an absurd final margin, which I can more easily kind of hand wave away when it's like Baylor and K-State, two top 10-ish programs. Not so much here, even though West Virginia is a very good basketball team, which I think we've all said various versions of.
Real quick pop quiz. Do you guys know the last time that Houston played West Virginia in women's basketball?
I do. I want to see if Bobby does, though. This is not me trying to be slick.
2003.
It's the NCAA tournament game.
Yeah.
Oh,
the last time Houston was in the NCAA tournament. 2011.
Yeah.
First round, we lost by 6 to West Virginia up in Waco, a game I was at.
Shout out Brittany Taylor. Just always a good shout out.
Oh, just always a great shout out. Just a champ.
Yeah. Or Courtney Taylor.
Courtney Taylor. Why did I say? There was a Brittany on that team, though, right? On that team too. Okay, now I'm just going to kill me if I don't. Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Courtney Taylor.
So,
front court player.
Courtney Taylor. Definitely
Yes.
Courtney Taylor.
Well, I know it's Courtney Taylor because, true fact, not only was I at that game, I was sitting directly next to Courtney Taylor's parents at that game. And when the game ended, I turned to them and was like, "Hey, I've really enjoyed watching your daughter play for the last 4 years. Thanks."
She was so good.
She was so good. That was Houston had that crazy senior class where.
Yep. And you just knew they were going to make the tournament that year. Like going into it, you were like
Brittany Scott,
yep.
and Brittany Mason. We had two Brittany's on that team.
You just knew going into that season that team was going to make the tournament. Like it sounds terrible, but like it didn't matter who was the coach, what the situation was. Like Courtney Taylor was going to the tournament that year. Like you could just feel it.
It's been a long enough time since that season. I think I don't know how, but I just remember this weird Roxanne Button, also rotation player on a team, is an OBGYN now. That's how long it's been since that since that season. Hope we don't have to wait another 12 years for a team that was as awesome as the 2010, 2011. I was doing some background the season preview, and I just I wanted to see what Courtney Taylor, Roxanne Button, and like the Brittany's Mason and the other one were up to.
That's awesome.
I have the most worthless factoids. Like I struggle to remember passwords, but I remember that factoid about a rotation player on the 2010.
Seems like is it an exclamation point? What's the
exactly?
Roxanne Button, OBGYN.
Bam! Got those factoids on the front of my mind clearly.
Name dropping players from the 2010 basketball team. Shout out to Portia Speed Landry.
Portia Speed
Landry.
All right.
Anyway, so women's hoops at West Virginia on Wednesday. They'll be back home at the Fertitta Center to host the Oklahoma Sooners on Saturday. Oklahoma has been one of the weirder teams to try and figure out. They opened non-conference play 5-0, and then lost 5 of their last 6 in non-conference play, including a truly baffling 9-point home loss to Southern University to close out non-conference play. So a team playing like that heading into Big 12 play, gonna get crushed, right? Not so much. It does help that the Big 12 schedule makers gave the Sooners a pretty soft landing to Big 12 play, but they have been impressive nonetheless. They opened up conference play with double-digit wins over UCF, BYU, and Cincinnati. 3 straight double-digit wins. Then they took a loss to an excellent Kansas State team before recording another double-digit margin of victory against Texas Tech to improve to 4-1 in Big 12 play in their last game. So yes, they are 4-1, largely on the backs of having played mostly teams expected to finish in the bottom half of the Big 12, Sam, but they've beaten those teams comfortably, and Houston was one of those teams too. So I think definitely a game that even at home looks like it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, not a team on the level of Baylor or K-State, but I would say definitely still better than the 2 teams that you just beat in conference play. And I think, just based on head-to-head, better than the Texas Tech team who beat you in your opener. Weird team resume-wise, like you said, Dustin, but I do feel like on the balance, taking out that the outlier against Southern, I would say a team on par with the Middle Tennessee team that the Cougs saw back in non-conference. But I think, again, just being competitive for 4 quarters here, maybe a bit more so than you were against West Virginia, is the goal here. Extremely skilled offensive team, averaging just under 8 points per game. Really impressive balance. You have 4 Sooners averaging double-digit scoring. and a really deep team. Like you talk about teams that have pretty good rotations, but they have 11 players who've seen action in all but one of their games. And I think that's something to watch, given I feel like U of H usually has a larger group of rotation players than their opponents. Probably not the case here. Wanted to shout out individually Skylar Vann, a real matchup problem, averaging over 14 points and 7 boards per game. I think importantly with the ability to stretch opponents out because she's proven she can at least make it occasionally from 3-point range. And just highlight also a trio of guards, Peyton Verhulst, Sahara Williams, and Aubrey Jones are all averaging just over 10 points per game. Jones and Verhulst in particular have shown an ability to make teams pay from deep. Williams is, I would say, near lock to be on the conference all-freshman team. I mean, not to repeat myself from the last opponent, but a deep and skilled offensive team. Winning this one will be a challenge, though, again, not on the level of, say, beating Baylor or K-State or even the Longhorns. I think just if the Cougars can compete closer in this one than they did in the opener against Tech, where really Tech got a big lead in the first quarter and kind of just kept the Cougars at arm's length, I think just not to have too low expectations, but that to me would be a real sign of progress, even if this ends up being a loss. Just competing for 4 quarters, having an outcome that's at least somewhat in doubt later in the game.
Yeah, for me, the big thing that you said, Sam, is what I was kind of focusing on is the depth of this team. One of the big things when you are playing the style of defense and offense that U of H plays is you have a lot of depth because you can rotate players because you're going to go full energy the whole time. If they're stacking them that deep as well, maybe you'll lose that advantage that you have over most teams. And if that happens, it could get ugly if you can't wear them down enough. Getting some of their players into foul trouble could certainly help that. But yeah, it's going to come down to can you tire them out? And like you said, Sam, you'd like to see it be competitive for 4 quarters rather than you get blown out in a quarter and then you're just kind of trying to hold on from there.
Yeah, and then after hosting the Sooners this weekend, the Cougs will be in Lubbock on Wednesday to face Texas Tech. Early return trip for Houston, who you may remember opened Big 12 play with that 79-71 home loss to the Red Raiders. The Red Raiders have gone just 1-3 since then with the win over Kansas, losses to the Longhorns and the Oklahoma schools. And yeah, kind of like you said against OU, same goes for that. You can't fall behind 19 in the first quarter again. I think is the lesson you took from that first matchup against the Red Raiders. We've talked till we're blue in the face about turnovers. You can't turn it over 22 times. If you're going to make the, kind of your big thing being winning the turnover margin, doesn't matter how many times you turn them over, you're not going to have a plus turnover margin if you turn it over 22 times yourself. So definitely tough to go on the road and beat a team that came into your own building and beat you there. But nonetheless, this is as tough as the Big 12 is. This is also one of the more, I think, winnable games. And, like we've said a bunch of times, if you want to prove that 2-game winning streak is a sign that things are different, then let's see a different result here than we saw, in the Fertitta Center.
Yeah, really comes down to the perimeter defense. I don't have a ton new to say about Texas Tech. A high ceiling offensive team. We saw a high ceiling when they, I think, had 30 plus points in the first quarter when these two teams met last. I think just not letting them blow you out the same way you did early in that one, just competing and I think eating your Wheaties in terms of perimeter defense, just not letting the Red Raiders have as many good looks as they had from deep. I mean, I think they were genuinely feeling, I don't think it was entirely lax defense that led to that crazy start in the Big 12 opener. I think combination of maybe the Cougars not having their A game defensively and also Texas Tech being a good three-point shooting team that doesn't need a whole lot of help there. So again, just want to see them compete more. Would love to get the first Big 12 road win here, but I think barring that, just compete more than you did the last time these teams met. Now that you have 40 minutes of basketball against them, show me something better in this one.
Yeah, I think for me, you got blown out in the first quarter of the first game, but really at the end of the day, you kind of beat them by 11 the rest of the way. Keep that up, and I'd like to see you perform how you did for 3 quarters for this game, and maybe pull a win out and get that first road win in the Big 12.
All right, I think with that, we'll go ahead and move on. You guys ready to talk some Cougar track and field here?
Yes, sir.
Let's do it, buddy.
All right. So I would say we're doing a season preview because the season is coming up. We did kind of fall a little behind as the indoor track and field season actually just started this past weekend, but we're nonetheless, we're going to take the opportunity to do our.
Why am I booing myself? That doesn't.
I don't know, Bobby. I don't remember you leading the track and field preview last week, Bobby. No, I'm kidding. No, but the Cougars, I think definitely, at a really interesting crossroads. Again, a bit of a cliche. You could probably say that about every team entering the Big 12. But I think for Cougar track and field, it's especially true. For the women's team, you've got a team that was kind of competing for second best in the American under UCF, never really became the dominant force in the AAC that we saw the men become, never really became nationally relevant in the American the way that we saw the men do. But at the same time, for the men, they're also at their own crossroads because this men's team ended American Athletic Conference play on a streak of 3 consecutive non-conference championships. They won indoors 2 years ago, then did not finish second at outdoors 2 years ago, and finished second at both indoor and outdoor championships of the American Athletic Conference the last year. And that's something that we've not been used to for this program. We've been used to this program kind of, comfortably winning the AAC for the most part. And the season didn't really kind of start until you went to nationals, right? Because it's just like, okay, that you were going to win conference was kind of a given. The season starts when you actually go to nationals. And that's one of the things that makes this coming season really interesting it was going to be interesting anyway, I guess, because you go back to the American where you keep finishing closely in second in these conference championships, but also you're moving to a much better, tougher, deeper, more talented conference for both men's and women's track and field. That's certainly true. So for the women, a whole new challenge of, you're not fighting for second place behind UCF. You're going to try to duke it out and try to pull your way up into the middle of a conference and build from there. And certainly I think that's, especially on the women's side, this is a program that's going to need to build a couple of years to I think have a chance to be competitive in the Big 12. And then on the men's side, it's rediscovering, hey, what is your team's ceiling, right? Is this still a team that, like we saw, 4, 5, 6 years ago, that can be on the podium as a team at national championships? Does this team still have that ceiling? Is this team going to rediscover that ceiling moving to a tougher conference? Is that going to help you and, the quality of athlete that you're going to recruit when you're in the Big 12 versus in the American Athletic Conference? But Sam, before we get to in kind of the personnel here, I think it is interesting just kind of talking about the storylines of where this team is at and what level they're going to find themselves competing at in the Big 12 here.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting dynamic because it's not as if the track has more resistance at the Big 12 championship meet versus the American meet. It's your athletes versus their best times, their best performance, if it's not a timed event. But you have 2 recent national champions and the University of Texas at Austin and Texas Tech. You have BYU and Oklahoma State are 2 truly elite distance programs themselves. So it's still a higher level of competition, even if the direct way you compete is maybe a little bit different than a lot of the team sports we talk about here on this podcast. And yeah, I wouldn't say a team trending downward because you did have the transition, Leroy Burrell leaving for just the really understandable and, difficult reasons that had to leave with his son passing. I just generally wanted a fresh start. Anytime you go from a coach who is just an absolute University of Houston legend, and to be clear, handing it off to a University of Houston legend in Carl Lewis and his right-hand man who for so many years, and Will Blackburn, your director of track and field, and Carl Lewis, your head coach. Not that there aren't great, capable guys around the program, but Leroy Burrell is a hell of a hard act to follow, just as a human being and as a coach. And, just not that we're not previewing Auburn here, but there's a reason why Auburn track and field, if you go to the college track aggregator accounts, that Auburn track and field is making, I'm sure, a lot more appearances in those places now than they were a couple years ago. Just again, we'll take any opportunity to just say what a great coach Leroy Burrell was, just one of the absolute best to do it. So I think there's some understandable transition there. And, I think I kind of structured my thoughts about this indoor season generally kind of in the form of asking myself, interesting questions. What you have in Sean Maswanyani, Davion Wilson, and Christian Sampe certainly should be contenders in their respective events come Big 12 indoor meet. Can that trio be as competitive at the indoor level as they all were in the most recent outdoor season where they were all among the very best in the country at their events? I think that'll be interesting to ask. One of the transfer additions, you hit me to this one, Dustin, really exciting one, David Ajama from USF in the triple jump. Really only a small amount of improvement there. And we're talking about a guy who's scoring points at NCAA indoor level. Even if there's no improvement, we're talking about a guy who's in the NCAA indoor picture. And I'm curious about is that the Drew Fucci effect? He is a really well-regarded jumps coach who came over from Rice. I was really impressed by the distance and jumps coaches they brought in last offseason. Clearly, this isn't just a sprinting program, even if sprinting is maybe the most notable thing that this program has done in terms of producing athletes for a specific type of event. And another guy, I think someone a bit further from, I guess where he was in the most recent indoor season to being NCAA indoor caliber, someone, again, you also have me too, Dustin, Drake transfer, Ethan Marshall. Can you take a step forward from being like a national top 100 performer, which again, no small feat in itself, to a guy who's going to be able to compete for conference hardware, maybe even get himself into the NCAA qualification picture. I mean, it's been a little bit, I feel like, since we've had a standout male thrower here, obligatory reference to the incredible ladies throw squad performance in the recent years. Can Ethan Marshall be that guy? I think that's an interesting question. Like you said, Dustin, on the women's side, more generally, you were kind of waiting, like, okay, is this the year that they become really competitive at the top of the American? It never really happened. Not that there aren't standout athletes like Kellyanne Beckford, who had an incredible first season of the program last year, like Destiny Lawrence, who I feel like has been kind of improving year on year. Alexis Tilford Rutherford kind of in the same boat there. Does returning all of your 4x4 athletes lead to kind of linear improvement and a team that can compete at Big 12 play? I think those are just all the interesting questions I'm kind of kicking around in my head now that we are one meet into the season. And, to give ourselves like a little bit of a break there, it does feel like the first meet of the indoor and outdoor season has kind of preseason vibe. So, I guess give ourselves a little bit of a break for technically doing our season preview one meet into the season.
Yeah, I would just kind of reiterate everything you guys said. Is what is this team going to, how are they going to take the next step? We've seen them at the top in nationals, be one of the teams that was competing for national championships, not only in events, but in team competitions. And it's kind of been the step back that we've kind of seen. And is H-Town Speed City ready to go to the next level? That's going to be, or take it back to the level that it was. You have one of the best young runner, or not even young, one of the best runners in the country, Sean Mosmaniani, coming in, or still running for us. And can you take advantage of his speed and what he's going to bring to the team?
Yeah, a lot of interesting questions for this team. I think we know what we have in Sean Mosmaniani as a sprinter.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He's one of the top sprinters in the country. Someone who I think in both indoors and outdoors is gonna threaten for national championships in the sprint events. I'm real curious to see with him. When he first signed, Carl Lewis talked up a lot about his long-term potential in the long jump as well. Felt like he had really high potential. We've seen him only kind of starting to compete in that event. Is this the year that it kind of becomes the triple threat and is able to threaten in the long jump as well? I think that's real interesting. What's Devian Wilson, in the short hurdles and even in the 400. I think obviously that's an outdoor event, so we don't need to worry about that one yet. But I guess just for indoor season, we'll talk about. He was had, I believe, the 12th best time in the 60-meter hurdles,
200ths off his personal best.
Yeah. So, he's someone who I think is going to threaten to go to nationals and score points, like you said. John Mosmaniani, certainly that's true. Christian Sampe in the pole vault, certainly that's true. David Ajama on the triple jump, and then Grant Levesque, who followed Fucci over from Rice. He was a really impressive athlete for Rice. His best, and someone who, Houston has never, as long as we've been following track and field, has never had anyone that was even remotely competitive. I don't think, even at the conference level, let alone the national level, in the multi events, the pentathlon, heptathlon, decathlon. And all of a sudden you get a guy in Grant Levesque who finished 9th at nationals outdoor for Rice, last year. So it gives you someone who immediately could come in and be a national point scorer contender in the multi events. Best event, it looks like it's the pole vault as well. Finished, I think 21st outdoors in the pole vault. Just really, really good pole vaulter for Rice as well. So, gives you maybe a second pole vaulter in addition to Christian Sampe, who can not only do well at the Big 12 level, but can even potentially do well at the national level. But then to circle back, you got Mosmaniani sprinting, but I think, for the longest time we knew with the sprinters, it wasn't just Mosmaniani, right? It was that we always had
the depth.
One year we had like 7 of the 8 finalists,
Right.
championships in the sprinting event. And that we've kind of seen that we haven't really seen the depth behind Sean, the last couple of years. So that's something that I'm real curious about, is do we have the depth in the sprinting events? Not, you don't get the 4x1 relay. That's only an outdoor event. So that doesn't really come into play in indoor seasons. So we won't worry too much about that just yet. But do you have the sprinting depth behind Sean Moswangani to get you, even if they're not, scoring points nationally, do you have someone else that can score points at the Big 12 championship to kind of help you out there? I think that's a big question. And then just from the freshmen, do you have, now that you're recruiting to the Big 12, do you have freshmen coming in who can make a difference? So lots of question on the men's side. On the women's side, I'm real intrigued by Miracle Thompson, JUCO short hurdler who put up some really impressive marks. If she had been Division I last year, her best marks would have been top 50 in both the 60-meter hurdles indoors and then the 100-meter hurdles outdoors. So, that's someone who seems like she has a lot of potential. Destiny Lawrence, real impressive triple jumpers, and long jumper for Houston. Alexis Tilford Rutherford, like you mentioned, Sam. Sydney Townsend, really impressive hurdler as well.
Yeah, that might be her,
yeah, it might be someone again who I keep. And this is, I think, why Houston has traditionally done better in outdoor season, is because we keep mentioning all these events that Houston does well at that are only outdoor events.
Right.
There's only the short hurdles in indoor season, no 400 hurdles, which was Sydney Townsend's best event. So might have to wait till outdoor season to see the best from her. So I think a lot of intriguing athletes on both sides. I think more of the intriguing transfers kind of coming in on the men's side. Michael Black, another guy who's JUCO last year, who's a high jumper who looks like he would have been an NCAA, not scorer, but at least someone that would have done well at like a Big 12 meet last year for Houston. So a lot of intriguing, transfers coming in. It's always a little bit harder to know what to expect from the freshman class, but I wouldn't say that despite, kind of the negative intro that I gave, hey, the men's team hasn't won the last 3 conference championships. Hey, the women's team never really got there briefly, but then took a distinct second place to UCF. You got to kind of reset your expectations heading into the season. You do have to account for the fact that, Leroy Burrell, like you mentioned, isn't around anymore, and it takes a little bit of getting used to that. But nonetheless, I'm still heading into track season, really intrigued, really optimistic, and really feeling like there's, even if this isn't this, I don't know if this is going to be a top 3 national team. I don't know if it's going to be a top 3 Big 12 team, but there are a lot of athletes here that I'm real intrigued to see, the season that they have.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's kind of a nice throwback almost in a way to have, the main sports we talk about, like football and the basketballs. There's not very much of a secret in terms of who your incoming players are and all that jazz, who's rated what. It's kind of cool in the track season to be like, oh yeah, that person's going, they're pretty cool. Obviously you can do the research on NJCAA track like you did with Miracle Thompson and others here, but kind of discover who your newcomers there with maybe a bit more of a dearth of information. And yeah, I think to echo what you said, Dustin, I think when it's all said and done, it's certainly the men's side, this is going to be one of the more competitive Big 12 programs that the Cougars have this athletic season. I don't think that's especially hot take on my part.
So we mentioned the Cougars opened their season this past weekend with the Leonard Hilton meet, and some intriguing matches. Again, you never take too much away from it because it's
first meet.
It's one meet and B, just it's early in the season where you're not going to see people putting up their best times of the year. A lot of the best athletes haven't ran at all yet, so you can look at some of the national rankings, and I will look at some of the national rankings after 1 week, but you take them with I think several grains of salt because of just knowing that there's so much of the season left to come. But, I think a couple of things that really stood out as interesting to me is, just seeing Christian Stampy kind of looking, mid-season form right out of the gates in the pole vault. That was really exciting. I think it was just like a fraction of an inch off of the best height that he cleared all last indoor season. He cleared already. Currently ranked number 2 collegiately in the nation, clearing 18 feet 1 3/4 inches. And then Devian Wilson, really impressive 60 hurdles time. He's currently ranked number 3 in the 60 hurdles there. And someone like Lanisha Thompson, who didn't really have a big year last year, but had her personal best in the 60 meters. 60-meter dash, 7:37. Anytime you're putting up a personal best in the first meet of the year. I think that's a good sign because, again, your first meet of the year shouldn't be your best time of the year. So if you're already putting up personal bests, that means that maybe she's going to really have a season that significantly improves on what we've seen from her. And she's a senior, someone I think has maybe a chance here to make an impact. And then, we mentioned Cindy Townsend, who was such an impressive, long hurdler, 400 hurdler. She talked about, okay, her best event doesn't come up until outdoor season, but she ran in the 800 just as a straight runner and put up a time that is top 10 in the country as of yet. So again, several grains of salt with all these numbers. But I think nonetheless, some interesting, kind of intriguing results from Houston's first meet.
No doubt.
Yep.
All right. So the Cougars will be back in action this week, this coming weekend already. They will be at the Ted Nelson Invitational in College Station this Saturday. So looking forward to that. Any event that the Aggies host in track and field, is going to have a lot of top teams, top athletes. So that'll be really intriguing as well. Also do want to mention that, yes, we are aware we are the completionists, but we did kind of miss not only track and field, but swimming and diving opening up their season. So their second event is not this coming weekend, but the one after that. So look forward to some more swimming and diving coverage in next week's episode. I didn't mean to insult anybody with that program by not talking about them as they were opening up their season here. But yeah, excited about the track and field, excited to get swimming and diving. And Bobby, I know you're going to be out next week when we would otherwise be previewing the return of men's golf. So while we've got you here, let's talk about Houston's most successful historical program.
Yeah, let's do it, guys. So let's talk about 2023 before we start talking about 2024. In case you don't follow golf very closely, 2023 was a pretty big success for the UH Cougar golf team. The Cougs won their first AAC title, led by individual champion Santiago de la Fuente and individual silver medalist Austin Riley. So those two guys led the Cougars to that AAC title. They won by a massive 12 strokes. If you don't follow golf, please understand that 12 strokes is a ton of strokes to win by. So again, if you don't follow golf very closely, you take your top 5 players, you send 5 players to the tournament. They take their scores, they add them up, and lowest score wins. So winning by 12, that means your 5 best players just absolutely dominated the other guys. And if you win gold and silver, that's a pretty good indication of how well it went for you. Following that, they took a trip to the regional in Auburn, and kind of disappointingly, they took 10th out of 13th. Didn't really expect them to go out and win that regional or anything like that, but kind of wanted them to contend for a trip to the NCAA championships, and they just didn't. Plain and simple, they fell 26 strokes off of advancing there. So not great at the regional, but overall, I would say a pretty good season last year. But as we've said, with pretty much every team that has joined the every team in our athletic department, it doesn't matter because you are about to take a massive step up in competition. Like I said, just like every other team in the athletic department did. So last year, just to kind of put it in perspective, the American had 0 teams qualify for the NCAA championships. The Big 12 had 5. You had Texas Tech, BYU, Oklahoma, and Baylor. I know I'm kind of fudging by saying BYU qualified as one of the 5, but they're in the conference now. So now, just for some clarification about the level of competition that you're playing, at the NCAA championships, every team plays 3 rounds. After that, the top 15 teams get to play in the 4th round. And to be fair to our conference brethren, none of the Big 12 teams made that final round, so they weren't in the top 15, but it's still a massive step up in competition. But we do have some good news. Out of the 5 players that were on the team, the Cougars lose 2 of their guys. The Cougs lose Braxton Watkins and his 72.88 scoring average, which will hurt. That I won't deny that. And then I would imagine though you'd keep your top 3 of Santiago de la Fuente, Wolfgang Glow, and Austin Riley. So you're going to keep those 3. The big question is who takes those final 2 spots. right? Based on the amount of tournaments played last year, I'd kind of assume that Ruben Lindsay, who played all but one tournament, which was the conference championship, he did not play in that one, it appeared. But the big problem with that theory is going to be his scoring average. Of everyone who played in a tournament, he had the highest scoring average, which isn't ideal.
I heard that's bad in golf. High score,
it's not
bad.
great.
Low score,
it's
good.
not great. Yeah, it's not great. So who's gonna take that? Another name to watch is Nick Sutton. Nick Sutton played in about half the tournaments, and with that though, he did have the third lowest scoring average. So look for him to make some appearances for this team. Now, another cool thing about Nick, really encouraging thing, he qualified in the offseason for the U.S. Amateur with a 67, which anybody who can qualify for the U.S. Amateur is a good golfer, and it's a really nice thing to have on your team. Another person to not be surprised to see is a transfer, Lorenz Schiergen, and he's probably going to make a few starts as well. He plays for the German national team, so that's kind of interesting. So in their amateur youth events, they're playing him, and he's transferred in from K-State, just to kind of prove that he's going to probably play in a couple of tournaments for the Cougs. Coach Dismuke said he's looking for him to be an immediate impact player and to provide depth for the team, which it's kind of funny, top five players, but the roster's pretty stacked. It has a lot of guys on it. So, it is kind of funny to think about depth in a non-contact sport like that, but, it's something you absolutely need. And, the final name to kind of watch will be sophomore Hudson Weibel. When I was initially looking at the statistics from last year, things like that, he didn't really pop off the page to me, but in the fall tournaments, we talked about how the first meet kind of feels like preseason for track and field. I would say that the fall series tournaments for golf is kind of their preseason, where they kind of figure out who's going to play in some of these more meaningful tournaments. And Hudson played in just about every tournament in the fall season. So he didn't play a massive amount last year, but he's looked really good in those tournaments in the fall. In fact, he went as low as 67 in a tournament that I saw. So really someone to kind of keep an eye on, who could be a Cougar golfer and play in the top 5 for many more years. So definitely watch out for him as you kind of track the statistics. Now, another cool player that I'm going to mention, he's a freshman. He's not really going to be a massive part of the team. I wouldn't be surprised if he took a red shirt, but I have to mention this awesome little nugget that I found. Grant Doggett, on his official profile under his list of accomplishments on the U of H website, mentions he attended the Houston men's golf camp at the age of 9 and was named Camper of the Week. So he thought highly enough of the program back then that he decided to sign with U of H, and wanted to put in his profile that he was named Camper of the Week at the men's golf camp that Houston hosts. So thought that was kind of funny, just to, they're trying to make his whole profile, and they're like, so what'd you do in your junior career? And he was like, hey, 10 years ago, I was at the junior camp. You guys may remember me. I was Camper of the Week. So
I assume Houston offered him on the spot.
Yeah, they had to, right? So
I said Disney would have been here by, because Disney got here in 2009, 2010. So
yeah, that was probably his first year.
Yeah.
So just one of those things. I think I saw it and I texted Sam immediately, and I was like, hey man, I don't know how I'm going to slide this in here, but I have to mention this. And Sam was like, absolutely.
I insisted that you found a way to work it in. I'm glad you did.
So just to kind of season outlook for the Cougs, they're probably not going to win the conference like they did last year with that step up in competition, but with a bunch of upperclassmen and quite a few returning players, plus some key transfers, I really think this team should hopefully look pretty good and compete in some tournaments. Are they going to win the Big 12 or something like that? I wouldn't bet my money on it, but I'd look for them to finish in the top half of a lot of the tournaments that they're entering. But one of the big things with this team that they're going to need to really take the next step is you have to get consistency from someone other than De La Fuente. De La Fuente can go low, and he can play consistent, right? He's not one of those guys that you often watch him go out and shoot a 64 and you go, oh my God, that is incredible. That's going to keep us in it. He's a solid 68 to 70 golfer, right? He's going to go out there and you know what he's going to give you. The problem is the rest of the team, you have a lot of guys who can go out and give you a 65, but those same guys the next day can go out and give you a 78. And that big wide range of results is what can kind of hurt your tournament chances, right? More consistency. How I kind of have it written down here is to explain it in another sport. It's basically the equivalent of the Colorado Rockies in the 90s, right? They'd go out and they would score 10 a game, but they'd give up 12. And sure, it's great to go score 10, and sometimes you'll win 10-2, but sometimes you're going to lose 15-12. And that's not the way to win consistently. You have to go out. I would much rather see a golfer go out and shoot 4 rounds of 70 than to go out and shoot a 65 followed by a 78. You can give me consistently mediocre scores, not that I'm calling a 70 mediocre, right? If you can consistently go out and give me a solid score versus going out and giving me an incredible score and a bad score, I'd rather have that. So, in conclusion, for 2024, I think the Cougs, while they are currently ranked right about 67 on the Spike Mark rankings, it feels about right for them, and I would expect them to maybe rise a little bit and surprise some teams in the Big 12 tournament.
Yeah, I was going to say the only thing about the men's golf team that kind of stood out from the fall was that I didn't want it to fall to end, right? Because they ended it so positive.
Really encouraging
with,
fall,
really,
yeah.
with a really
Very
encouraging performance at Big 12 match play. And you're like, oh, great. That's one of the more encouraging performances we've seen, over the last few years, along with, winning the AAC last year for sure as well. But you just kind of wanted to see them keep going and hey, can you keep getting the depth of guys behind De La Fuente really putting up strong performances on a regular basis? 'Cause I think that has certainly been kind of the issue. But, broadly, it's a team that, a handful of years ago seemed like they were really struggling, and it's good to see them kind of what feels like they're a little bit in the upswing again. Definitely need to add a little bit more depth like we talked about. And, like I said, not going to step in and compete at the top of the Big 12 right away, like you talked about, but really intrigued to see kind of a program on the upswing and how they're able to, hopefully use that Big 12 conference membership to take another step forward over, this year and the next couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, I think that's where we're going to end it then, because we've been going for almost 2 hours and everyone here is
We'll talk
hungry.
football stuff next week. There's plenty to talk about. Football's not going anywhere. I promise you. We will hit all the recent football news next week when we have less than 2 hours of content.
Will we have less than 2 hours of content? I'm not sure, because we're previewing like 2 more sports next week, but we'll do our
It'll just
best.
be the 2 of us. That'll help.
Yeah, that'll since I won't be here. You guys can kick it old school style and preview sports and talk every sport ever and
we'll still fucking go long. I know it.
Yeah.
I'm boxing myself into saying it's not gonna happen. But yeah, we will talk football next week. We are acknowledging it here.
Book us for a 2-hour episode next week. But no, so on the way out, just huge thank you to those of you that are already supporting us on Patreon. Just tremendously appreciated by all of us. So if this is something that you enjoy on a regular basis, if you feel like you can afford $5 a month to put towards the work that we do, we would love for you to go to patreon.com/shpodcast. You can sign up to be a Scott and Holman patron. You can also get in contact with us, emailing us shpodcast@gmail.com, tweeting at us at shpodcast, or definitely getting our attention by messaging or tweeting or posting at us on Blue Sky at podcast.bsky.social. Was this past week the week where I finally started posting there regularly? No. This next one's still has a chance though. So we'll see. We'll see how
Fingers crossed, buddy. Fingers crossed. I believe in you.
Gonna make that happen. Like I'm gonna make Fetch happen. It's totally making Blue Sky a thing. Had to drop a Mean Girls reference here on the outro because why not? Anyway, if you made it all the way to the Mean Girls part of the episode, you are the absolute greatest, and you can absolutely sit with us. And as always,
go Cougs.
Go Cougs.
Vamos los Cougs.
Go Cougs.
Go Cougs.
All right. Go Cougs. Let's go.